I'm curious if it sounds like you might be studying law. or at least were you in philosophy or law? It sounds like law. I would guess law. That's pretty. Huh. I actually recently went back to Aquinas for some natural law, because ooh, okay. Yep, that makes sense. Yeah, I was a big fan of Aquinas. I don't know. What's your thought on Aquinas v Hegel? There would be interesting, because Aquinas is, I don't know. It seems. I guess I don't know enough about Hegel to make any kind of assessment there. He sounds like potentially maybe a secular development from there. Science of logic. That's, yeah. I am. I'm interested in hunting down some more natural law theory. I think that's an undervalued moral inquiry. Hume, of course, is an empiricist, sentimentalist, and a rather boring philosopher, which makes him perfect for reading out loud. Getting my crafty philosopher hands ready. Let's pull this guy over here. If I can get out of this chair. There we go. Lock. Ooh, okay. Yeah, you got the cool ones, it looks like. I had to go back for all of the all the ancients, the ones that lost their relevance around Aristotle's time. Okay. You're not a fan of Hume, though. That's that's. I mean, I guess to each their own. But Hume's so, or no, maybe you just like Hegel more, right? Plato. That's one that I haven't encountered a lot of favorites with, because Plato is quite the he's quite old, and he's quite vague, and I think that's the problem with. He sort of, it seems like he's speaking, he writes like Carl Jung writes, where he's almost talking in these like broad stroke themes rather than actually trying to like distinguish particular ideas in the same way that like Aristotle is, because Aristotle's a lot more precise with his language. Exactly, yeah. Plato was writing poetry, and Aristotle was trying to start a field of science, I feel like. Yeah, you can read anything from Plato. He's fun, though. I do like Plato, or at least what is attributed to him. Hume, I think the joy of Hume, if there can be such a thing, is in his clarity and his groundedness. He's very straightforward. He don't mince words. He's not Kant. You can derive anything from Kant as well, although you weren't supposed to. You were supposed to derive one idea from Kant, but words don't work like that. He seems to be writing like words can be mathematical. Indeed. Generally speaking, that is the case. It's unfortunate. He had some I don't know, if you dive into the metaphysics, he can be fun to work with, but he also can be a lot of fun not to work with. A lot more fun not to work with. I think the other fun thing about Hume is that he's very clearly continuing the project Aristotle started, but he's trying to get away from the metaphysics of virtue that I think Kant sort of latched onto and was like, we can run way left field with this. And instead, Hume is a lot more scientific. He's trying to stay in a nice and grounded, observable place where all men can agree on the things they see. Good luck with that one, buddy. All abstract reasoning has this disadvantage. It can silence an opponent without convincing him, because it's as hard to see the force of such an argument as it was to discover the argument in the first place. When we leave our study and get involved in the common affairs of life, the argument's conclusions seem to vanish like the phantoms of the night when sunrise comes, and it's hard for us to retain even the conviction that we had so much trouble acquiring. This is even more conspicuous with a long chain of reasoning, where we have to preserve the evidentness of the first propositions right through the end, and where we often lose sight of accepted maxims of philosophy or of common life. But I have some hope that the system of philosophy that I am presenting here will gather force as it advances, and that my reasonings about morals will corroborate what I have been saying about the understanding and the passions. We care more about morality than about anything else. We imagine the peace of society to be at stake in every decision concerning it, and obviously that has to make our theoretical thinking about morality appear more real and solid than our thoughts about any subject that doesn't much matter to us. Anything that has an effect on us, we think, can't be a chimera, and so it must be real. And because our passions are engaged on the one side or on the other in disputes in morality, we naturally think that the question lies within our intellectual reach, which is something we aren't sure of in other cases of this nature. Without this advantage, I wouldn't have ventured on a third volume of such abstract philosophy, at a time when most people can seem to agree in taking reading to be a mere pastime, and in rejecting anything that can't be understood without a great deal of concentration. Moral distinctions aren't derived from reason. I have said that nothing is ever present to the mind but its perceptions, and that perception covers all the actions of seeing, hearing, judging, loving, hating, and thinking. Anything the mind can do is a perception, so our judgments, distinguishing moral good from moral evil, are as much perceptions as anything else the mind does. Approving this character and condemning that are merely two perceptions. Perceptions fall into two kinds: impressions and ideas. So let us start our inquiry into morals with that distinction by asking, when we distinguish vice from virtue and declare a given action to be blameworthy or to be praiseworthy, are we doing this by means of our ideas or by means of our impressions? This will immediately cut short all loose discussions and speeches and bring us down to something precise and exact concerning our subject. It has been maintained that 1. Virtue is nothing but conformity to reason. 2. There are eternal fitnesses and unfitnesses of things, which are the same to every rational being who considers them. And 3. The changeless standards of right and wrong impose obligations not only on human creatures, but also on God himself. All these views have something in common, because they all imply that morality, like truth, is discovered merely by putting ideas together and comparing them. So if we are to judge these theories, we need only consider whether unaided reason enables us to distinguish moral good from moral evil, or whether some other principle must be at work to enable us to make that distinction. If morality didn't naturally influence human passions and actions, it would be useless to try so hard to inculcate it, and nothing would be achieved by the multitude of rules and precepts that all moralists churn out. Philosophy is commonly divided into speculative and practical, and as morality is always classified as practical, it is supposed to influence our passions and actions, going beyond the calm, inactive judgments of the understanding. And this is confirmed by common experience, from which we learn that men are often governed by their duties, deterred from certain actions by the opinion that they would be unjust, and pushed into other actions by the opinion that they were obligatory. So morals have an influence on our actions and feelings, which implies that they can't be deprived from reason, because they can't be derived from reason, because reason alone, as I've already proved, can never have any such influence. Morals arouse passions and produce or prevent actions. Unaided reason is powerless to do such things. So the rules of morality are not conclusions of our reason. Oh my goodness. I love you, Coral. Okay. Where were we? Oh no. I knew that if I streamed this, it would be fun. Okay. I don't think anyone will deny that this inference is valid. There's no way to escape its conclusion except by denying its... I can't sing. I don't know if that... I'm so sorry. There's no way to escape its conclusion except by denying its premise. Namely, the principle that reason has no influence on our passions and actions. I'm singing like I'm in church. This is terrible. I need to... I need like a better... This is what I did last time. I put like something in C. Yeah, it's... I'm sorry. I'm gonna... Guitar in C. Here we go. If I just do... Oh. I think I can sing along if I've got like a guitar in the background here. Okay, we got like a country thing going. I might even be able to do it with a little bit of an accent here. There's no way to escape its conclusion except by denying its premise. You're going to speed up, right? Is there going to be a beat drop? There's not going to be a beat drop. Okay. It's hopeless to claim that morality is discovered purely through deduction of reason. An active principle and never be based on something inactive. And if reason... Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I've got to be tone deaf. That's not singing. I know. I'm so embarrassed. I'm sorry. I've got to be better at this. We'll try an E minor jam. Maybe I can sing an E minor. This is going to be disastrous. Okay. Let's turn that up. There we go. Oh yeah, the spoken word wasn't singing. No. I was just trying to get in the flow there, you know? It's hopeless to claim that morality is discovered purely through a deduction of reason. An active principle can never be based on something inactive. And if reason is intrinsically inactive, then it must remain so in all its shapes and appearances. Whether it exerts itself in natural subjects, the powers of external bodies, or in moral ones, the actions of rational beings. It would be tedious to repeat the arguments I presented in Section 2, Subsection 3, Section 3, to prove that reason is perfectly inert and can never prevent or produce any action or feeling. I'll return here to make just one of those arguments, which I'll try to make still more conclusive and more applicable to the present subject. Okay, I think that's... Oh, thank you. I appreciate. What's the, does it say, does it give you a time limit for how long I have to do that? I forgot. Reason is the discovery of truth or falsehood. Truth or falsehood consists in an agreement or disagreement either with the real relations of ideas or with real existence and matter of fact. $5, okay. So anything that isn't capable of this agreement or disagreement isn't capable of being true or false and can never be an object of our reason. Now our passions, volitions, and actions are basic facts and realities. They are complete in themselves and aren't in any way about other passions, volitions, and actions. So they aren't capable of either of those sorts of agreement or disagreement. Is he repeating himself? So they can't be sorted into true and false, and can be either in conflict with reason or in accord with it. This argument serves my purpose in two ways at once. It proves directly that actions don't get their merit from a conformity to reason. Oh, it dropped off there. Wasn't expecting that. And it proves the same truth more indirectly by showing that because reason can't immediately prevent or produce any action by contradicting or approving of it, it can't be the source of moral good and evil which do have that influence. Oh, now I'm jamming out to it. I wonder if Hume can be made metal. Actions, actions, actions can be made. They can be praiseworthy or blameworthy, but they can't be reasonable or unreasonable. So praiseworthy and blameworthy are not the same as reasonable and unreasonable. The merit and demerit of actions frequently contradict and sometimes control our natural patterns of behavior, but reason has no such influence. So moral distinctions are not the offspring of reason. Reason is wholly inactive, and can't be the source of such an active principle as his conscience or a sense of morals. Power metal Hume, I absolutely support. You may want to say, although no will or action can be immediately contradictory to reason, perhaps reason, can be contradicted by the sum of the cause of his acts, can be contradicted by some of the causes or effects of the action, can be contradicted. Perhaps reason can be contradicted by some of the causes or effects of the action. That's what we may want to say. action may cause a judgment, or it may be obliquely caused by one. When the judgment goes along with a passion, and in such a case, we might say that the action is in conflict with reason. Okay. I think I've exhausted all of the chords that I can sing in E. Oh, Lord. You redeemed another? Where's the other one? I only see the one. Oh, did you did it twice. Oh no. Okay, I guess I'm continuing. But we're going to change the genre this time. We're going to do pick a chord or an instrument. We don't even have to do a guitar in the background, but I probably can't sing to harp. Let's see. Oh, thank you kindly for the host, Coral. Very kind. Okay, let's see. We're gonna do. Maybe we'll do electric guitar in D. Maybe D. Can I sing in D? Probably not. Electro metal. We should do electro metal. Okay, electro metal. I'm searching electro metal, and I'm hoping that I can just get electro metal. What do I put? Like backtrack or just put electro metal. Is there? How do I get just instrumental? There we go. Okay. Let's try this out. I'm afraid. I've never heard this genre of music before. This is new for me. Okay. If I thought I couldn't sing before. Okay, we're gonna okay. Where were we? We gotta get our jam on. People still do this? Saying this! Attributing the conflict with reason to the action itself rather than to some judgment that is cause or effect of the action! I can't. I don't think that's how people sing. Actually, I'm now realizing that's not singing. Is there how do people sing to that? This is art. I love it. Do we like that? Do we like that? Should I just continue David Hume and oh, you'll allow it? Okay, wonderful. That's what we'll do then. But without any such misuse, you can still say that what makes an action right or wrong is the relation to the reason. It's gonna drop. I feel it. I've entered Batman mode. It's coming. It's coming. Right there. The truth or falsity of some judgment suitably associated with it. That is the issue I will now look into. To what extent can morals arise from the truth or falsehood of judgments that cause or are caused by the actions in question? I have pointed out that reason, in a strict and philosophical sense of the word, can influence our conduct in only two ways. It can arouse a passion by informing us of the existence of something that is proper object of it. Or it can discover cause-effect connections, thereby showing us how to go about satisfying some passion! Passion! Can I roar? I'm trying. Yeah, I don't know if that would Hume with metal. Of all of the people who can be paired with metal, I feel like there's a trick. Breathe in. Okay. If I don't wait for that, if I don't wait to start that step, I'm gonna miss step 2, and then I'm just gonna be holding my breath for like 3 minutes. Oh, vocalize breathing in. Oh, I see. I have pointed out. Nope. There was no voice there. I am. Nope. Oh, that's gonna take a lot of practice, I'm assuming. Think of it like a burp. Burps go out, don't they? I am pointed out. That reason. I don't think that's doing anything. Pointed. Oh. When you breathe in for a burp, you have to kind of grip. I am. Oh, this is. These are sounds I didn't know I could make. Pointed out that reason. No, I don't think. Oh. Stricken build. I don't think that sounds good. For on your end. On my end, I don't really hear it, but I'm assuming on your end it sounds terrible. So not using your vocal cords. Okay. How not use? I could never like burp on will either, so that may be a lack of talent on my part. Oh, it's like in the okay. I'm really trying here, but nothing's coming. Well, nothing's coming out because I'm inhaling, but also like no sound is exiting. I must look really weird right now. I feel like my head's gonna implode. I have pointed out that reason, in a strict and philosophical sense of the word, can influence our conduct in only 2 ways. Did I do it? Did that happen? I'm assuming no, but that's okay. We tried, family. We're always here to try new things. It can arouse a passion,
by informing us of the existence of something that is a proper object of it. It can discover cause-effect connections, thereby showing us how to go about satisfying some passion.
I feel like I sound like I'm on my deathbed. Metal Hume. Oh, will I really? That'd be bad, because then I'd have to stop streaming for quite a while. Streaming. Oh, actually, no, I wouldn't. Now that I've got those, now that I've got the lo-fi set up, I don't need my voice anymore. So that's good. Now you know that if I cease to, oh, I feel it. Oh, I feel it. Oh, that does. Whew. That's gonna take its toll, isn't it? Okay. Let's see. Make sure that in the shower. Okay, practice in the shower. That'll be a good. Yeah, this is a new skill to develop for a while. And then I'll have an entire new genre of singing to open up to, for when the singing is redeemed. You shouldn't use your vocal cords at all. Wow. Okay. That's quite a task. I didn't know it was possible not to use your vocal cords. I thought they were sort of like a passive thing that got used when sound was passed through, like when you know, like when you make sound with your mouth. Speech or singing. I found the trick one day and just practiced it until it clicked. So you can actually do that. That's crazy. Although that's pretty much how I learned to whistle. So I just kept at it, you know? Kept at it every day. I think I did practice in the shower because that was the only wow, that's impressive. That's an impressive skill. I can't sing in any form. I mean, you know, not like well, or like with, you know, direction. I can sometimes sing along to a rap song if, you know, the rap song doesn't require melody. Many of them don't, which is why I often like rap music. Oh, I thought, well, I mean, to be fair, there are a lot of, you know, there's, I know, like, oh no, Bigfoot Bjornsson actually can do the Mongolian throat singing, so never mind. I was going to say, I think he was trying to give me a story, but no, he can actually do it. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, yeah, but I appreciate that, definitely. Yeah, that's probably. So now, of course, saw it here first. My first lesson in metal. What is that called? What kind of singing was that called again? That was the name of our primary moral philosophy. This one, or we are talking about music while you're making music, Callie. This is David Hume. This is his book, a treatise on human nature, I believe, book 3, which is on morals, and yeah, that is where we were. This section is on virtue and vice in general. Yeah, we were talking about metal screaming or metal roaring. Oh yeah, we agree. Yes. Okay. So moral distinctions are not an offspring of reason. Reason is wholly inactive and can't be the source of such an active principle as is conscience or a sense of morals. You may want to say, although no will or action can be immediately contradictory to reason, perhaps reason can be contradicted by some of the causes or effects of the actions. The action may cause a judgment, or may be obliquely caused by one, when the judgment goes along with a passion, and in such a case we might say that the action is in conflict with reason. Saying this, attributing the conflict with reason to the action itself rather than to some judgment that is a cause or effect of the action, is a misuse of language, and philosophy will hardly allow it. The irony of David Hume thinking that philosophy will hardly allow anything. It's not lost. By the way, Callie, how is your song going? Oh yeah, this one. So this Hume is a sentimentalist. He's an empiricist, a sentimentalist. He is not a virtue theorist like Aristotle is, but David Hume is clearly carrying on the empirical tradition of Aristotle. He makes most of his arguments are structured in the same way that Aristotle did as well, with they're analogical, so they follow analogy, and he tends to prefer a sort of aesthetic assumptions about morality, about how we make moral judgments, sort of from a similar kind of place as we make our aesthetic judgments about things that are beautiful or ugly. And he seems to think that morality is much more like that. Much in the spirit of Aristotle. The difference between Hume and Aristotle comes to where they talk about things like virtue and about the purpose of virtue. Aristotle very much believes that there is a reason to be morally good, and that's that you can achieve eudaimonia, you can achieve sort of a perfect end state of human happiness, human bliss, almost like, but he means it like almost like a Buddhist nirvana. David Hume doesn't really make any kind of normative claims like that. He is, although Aristotle might have been making them descriptively, but Hume shies away from any kind of metaphysics. That's he really tries to keep it in the realm of just, I'm going to keep it to what I can observe. I can observe human behavior. I can describe biology. I can describe science and sort of the principles of evolution and whatnot. He does describe, it sounds like he's prescient of evolutionary theory. He wrote this, I believe, in the 1600s. Maybe it was 17, but I'm pretty sure it was 16. And so he was before Darwin. That was the point. He was before Darwin. But he does seem to anticipate a lot of evolutionary discussion. Yeah, absolutely, Callie. Send me the song. I'm very curious. Philosophical take on the morals of war. You want a philosophical take on the morals of war? Oh yeah, the three main moral philosophies, by the way. Insofar as there are three main ones, there would be non-consequentialists, consequentialists, and virtue theorists would be somewhere off to the side. So there's the people who think that the good of an action, or a good moral decision, you can judge the worth of an action. You can judge whether or not something, like somebody did the right thing, based on the consequences the action produced. But that can lead to some pretty nihilistic assumptions about right and wrong, saying that lying is good if it produces good things, and lying is bad if it produces bad things. You can't always know what the consequences of your actions will be, so it creates quite a dilemma for people who want sort of certainty, predictability from their moral theory. They want to be able to say, lying is always bad, and you shouldn't lie because it's almost always going to produce bad consequences. So non-consequentialists are people who don't care about the consequences. They want to judge the action on the face of the action itself, and usually they have to devise some kind of formula for how to do that. And then you have off to the side virtue theorists. Virtue theorists would say that the right or wrong of an action is judged by circumstantial factors and also related to the virtuousness of the person who did the action. So you can judge the worth of an action by the character of the person who did it. But you end up in a catch-22 situation with some virtue theories, because how do you judge a character? Well, you probably have to judge the person's character by the actions that they've done in the past. And if you're judging them by the actions they've done in the past, how do you know that they've been judged correctly if each of those was dependent on the character of the person when they did it, right? You've got sort of a cyclical loop. If their character is determined by their actions and we judge their actions by their character, how do we know what we're judging when and why? So it can seem kind of empty or scary. Let's see. Song. Yeah, so absolutely send me the song on Discord, please. Love to sing some Buddhist teachings in the style of Nirvana. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Saying this, attributing the conflict with reason to the action itself rather than to some judgment that is a cause or effect of the action is a misuse of language, and philosophy will hardly allow it. But without any such misuse, you can still say that what makes an action right or wrong is the relation to reason, i.e. the truth or falsity of some judgment suitably associated with it. This is the issue I will now look into. To what extent can morals arise from the truth or falsehood of judgments that cause, or are caused by, the actions in question? I've pointed out that reason, in a strict and philosophical sense of the word, can influence our conduct in only two ways. One, it can arouse a passion by informing us of the existence of something that is a proper object of it. Or two, it can discover cause-effect connections, thereby showing us how to go about satisfying some passion. These are the only kinds of judgment that can be said to produce our actions in any way. And of course, these judgments can often be false. You might be led to have a certain passion by your belief that pain or pleasure would come from something that, in fact, has no tendency to produce either pain or pleasure, or has a tendency to produce pain if you predicted pleasure, or pleasure if you predicted pain. You might go about achieving your purpose in the wrong way, foolishly doing things that hold back your project instead of pushing it forward. These false judgments may be thought to affect the passions and actions that are connected with them, and may be said to render them unreasonable in a figurative and improper way of speaking. But it's easy to see that such errors are far from being the source of all immorality, so far that they are commonly very innocent and don't bring any sort of guilt onto the person who has made the misfortune to fall into them. And all they involve is a mistake of fact. And moralists haven't generally thought such mistakes to be criminal because we don't choose to make them. If I am mistaken about what objects will produce pain or pleasure, or if I don't know the right way to go about satisfying my desires, you may feel sorry for me, but you won't blame me. No one could think that such errors are a defect in my moral character. And there's another point. If moral distinctions are derived from the truth or falsehood of those judgments, they must be applicable wherever we form the judgments. It won't make any difference whether the judgment in question concerns an apple or a kingdom, or whether the error is avoidable or unavoidable. The very essence of morality is supposed, by the theory I am discussing, to consist in agreement or disagreement with reason. So the other details of a situation make no difference and can't give any action the character of virtuous or vicious, or deprive it of that character. Also, this agreement or disagreement doesn't admit of degrees. There's no such thing as fairly much agreeing or greatly disagreeing. So on this theory, all virtues and vices would be equal. Someone might say, a mistake of fact isn't criminal, yet a mistake of right often is, and this may be the source of immorality. I reply that such a mistake can't possibly be the basic source of immorality, because it presupposes a real right and wrong. In essence, a real distinction in morals independently of these judgments. So a mistake of right may become a sort of immorality, but it would only be a secondary one, based on some other right-wrong distinction underlying it. It will also sound amazing, yeah. You'll have to post on Twitter or something if you do that. I'm on board 110%. As for judgments that are effects of our actions, and which when false might lead us to describe the actions as contrary to truth and reason, notice first that our actions may cause judgments in others, but never in ourselves. It often happens that an action gives rise to false conclusions in others. Someone who sees me through a window behaving in a lewd way with my neighbor's wife may imagine she is my wife. In this way, my action is a little bit like a lie, but with this difference that I don't act as I do with any intention of giving rise to a false judgment in someone else, but merely to satisfy my lust and passion. Still, it does accidentally cause a false judgment in someone, and this falsehood of its effect may be figuratively ascribed to the action itself, but I can't see the beginnings of any reason for claiming that the tendency to cause such an error is the basic source of all immorality. So the distinction between moral good and evil can't possibly be made by reason, because that distinction has something that unaided reason can't have, namely an influence on our actions. Reason and judgment may indeed be the mediated cause of an action, by prompting or by directing a passion, but no one claims that a judgment of this kind is accompanied by virtue if it is true, or by vice if it is false. And as for the judgments that are caused by our actions, they're even further from giving those moral qualities to the actions that are their causes. Here are some more detailed reasons for holding that there's no sound philosophical basis for the view that there are eternal, unchangeable fitnesses and unfitnesses of things. If unaided thought and understanding could fix the boundaries of right and wrong, any items being virtuous or vicious must consist either in some relations between objects or in some matter of fact that is discovered by our reasoning. It is obvious that this follows. The operations of human understanding are of two kinds: the comparing of ideas and the inferring of matters of fact. So if virtue were discovered by the understanding, it would have to be an object of one of those operations. There's no third operation of the understanding that could discover it. Certain philosophers have busily propagated the opinion that morality can be demonstrated, and though no one has ever advanced one step in those demonstrations, it is assumed that the science of demonstrative morality can be brought to a level of certainty equal to that of geometry and algebra. Now, no one thinks that any matter of fact can be demonstrated. So on this supposition that morality can be demonstrated, vice and virtue must consist in some relations. Let us put the supposition to the test by trying to fix these moral qualities that have for so long eluded our researches by pointing out the relations that constitute morality or obligation. If you contend that vice and virtue consist in relations that are capable of certainty and demonstration, you must confine yourself to the four relations that are the only ones admitting of that degree of evidentness. And if you do so, you'll run into absurdities from which you'll never be able to extricate yourself. The four relations I have mentioned can apply to beings that don't think, indeed to beings that aren't even alive, so they will have to be capable of moral merit and demerit if you are right that the very essence of morality lies in those four relations. They are resemblance, contrariety, degrees in quality, and proportions in quantity and number. These can relate inert material things, as well as they can relate our actions, passions, and volitions, and that settles the issue. Morality doesn't lie in any of these relations, and the moral sense doesn't make discoveries about them. If you say the sense of morality consists in the discovery of some relation other than those four, and when you brought all demonstrable relations under four general headings, you left something out, I don't know what to say in reply until you have the courtesy to tell me what the new relation is. It's impossible to refute a system that hasn't yet been explained. Trying to do so is fighting in the dark, wasting one's blows on places where the enemy is not present. In the meantime, I must rest content with saying that anyone who wants to clear up the system must make it satisfy two conditions. One, it must say that moral good and evil consist in relations between internal mental actions and external objects. Why? Well, consider the options. A, morality consists in relations of external objects to other external objects. B, morality consists in relations of internal objects to other internal objects. Or C, morality consists in relations of internal objects to external objects. If A were right, it would follow that even inanimate things would be capable of moral beauty and ugliness, so that's out. If B were right, it would follow that we could be guilty of crimes within ourselves, independently of where and how we were situated within the universe. So that's out too. All that remains is C. It's hard to believe that any relation can be discovered that will, C, relate internal objects to external ones that couldn't also, B, relate some of our passions, volitions, and actions to others of our passions, volitions, and actions, or A, relate external objects to other external objects. 2. The second condition that this system must satisfy will be even harder to make good on. Those who maintain an abstract rational difference between moral good and evil and a natural fitness and unfitness of things maintain that because these relations are eternal and unchangeable. 1. They are the same when considered by every rational creature, and 2. Their effects must also be the same, which implies that they influence the will of the deity as much as, indeed more than, they influence rational and virtuous human beings. These are evidently distinct points. It is one thing, A, to know virtue, and another, B, to conform your will to it. Thus, if you want to prove that measures of right and wrong are eternal laws that are obligatory on every rational mind, it isn't enough to merely show the relations they're based on. You must also point out the connection between those relations and the will, and to prove that this connection is so necessary that it must have its influence, the same influence, in every well-disposed mind, even when, in other respects, the differences between these minds are immense, and, in the case of ourselves and God, infinite. Now, I have already shown that even in human nature, no relation can ever prove on its own, I've already shown that even in human nature, no relation can ever on its own produce any action. And I've also shown in Book 1 that there is no connection of cause and effect, which is what we're supposed to have here, that can be discovered in any way except through experience. So there is none that could be discovered just by thinking about the objects. All the beings in the universe, considered in themselves, appear entirely loose and independent of each other. It's only by experience that we learn about their influence and connection, and this influence we ought never to be said to extend beyond experience. So there we have it. It's impossible to fulfill 1, the first condition for a system of eternal rational measures of right and wrong, because it's impossible to point out any relations on which the right-wrong distinction could be founded. And it's equally impossible to fulfill 2, the second condition, because we can't prove a priori that these relations, if they really did exist and really were perceived, would be universally forcible and obligatory. Oh, I'm scrolling back through the chat we got here. I remind you of Sheldon. I'm gonna. Oh, thanks for catching that, Callie. I appreciate it. Oh yeah. So essentially, I mean, all that Hume's arguing here, it's. Hume is a sentimentalist, so he believes that human morality comes from our emotions. It comes from our aesthetic judgments. So when we look out at the world and we say that flower is beautiful, and we look at somebody doing something good, like maybe they give like charity to a poor person or something like that, Hume thinks that our judgment of like that was morally good to do that is like saying, oh, that flower over there is beautiful. There were a lot of people around Hume and after Hume especially, but also before Hume, who argued that human morality is a process of our rationality. It's a process of our like mathematical and logical thinking. And David Hume is arguing against that because his claim is that reason, that mathematical and logical thinking, can't motivate behavior. We don't ever do anything like, we're never motivated to eat because 2 + 2 = 4. That rational process, that rational thought process, can't motivate any behavior. The only things that motivate us are passions and emotions. And so he thinks that we're motivated by sentiment. And therefore, when we're looking at actions, when we're looking at what people do in the world, if we're going to say that those actions have moral worth, that some actions are good and other actions are bad, then it has to come from the sentiment, the reason why it's good and bad. And so Hume is arguing that we should be studying human emotion as the source of human morality because it's the only explanation for what motivates human moral behavior. Rationality just falls short. The other problem that he's sort of identifying here is that rationality is the reason why a lot of people thought that rationality would be the source of our moral thinking is because we have morals, humans have morals, and no other animals have morals. So it seems like also humans can do math, and humans have, we have very advanced rational thinking skills. Animals don't have that. So if the only difference in our behavior, where we look at the morality and we also look at our ability to think rationally, there you go, you've got a relationship. And a lot of philosophers said, obviously our morality comes from our ability to think rationally because of that. And David Hume is arguing, no, our rationality is actually just sort of, it's a byproduct of evolution, probably. We are capable of thinking of all of these things, but our morality is actually something that it extends separately. It comes from our sentiments still, because it doesn't make sense that we don't actually use mathematical thinking or anything like that when we're trying to do good things in the world. And he's breaking it down on a very technical level, very metaphysical level, that there can't be any absolute relations between things, like in the souls of objects, the essences of their presence in the world. There's nothing that necessitates goodness or badness about that. So it just doesn't make sense that our rationality could be sort of latching onto that as a reason for moral worth. Yeah. To make these general reflections more clear and convincing, I shall illustrate them by two particular examples, one that everyone agrees involve the character of moral good or evil. The first concerns ingratitude, the most horrid and unnatural of all the crimes human creatures can commit, especially when it is committed against parents and expresses itself in wounding and killing. Everyone accepts this, philosophers as well as laymen, and the only question about it that arises among philosophers is this: is the guilt or moral ugliness of an act of ingratitude discovered by demonstrative reasoning or felt by an internal sense through some sentiment that naturally arises from thinking about such an action? The former answer to this question will soon be ruled out if I can show that the same relations hold amongst non-human objects without implying any guilt or wickedness in them. Using reason is nothing but taking two or more ideas together and discovering the relations among them. And if two instances of the very same relation have different characters, those characters can't be discovered merely by reason. I'm going to put that truth to work by presenting two instances of a certain relation, of which clearly one is morally bad and the other isn't, from which I'll infer that moral difference isn't discovered by reason. Let us choose any inanimate object, say an oak tree, and let us suppose that by dropping its seeds, this tree produces a sapling below it. The sapling gradually grows until at last it overtops and destroys the parent tree. Doesn't this involve every relation that can be found in parricide or ingratitude, the killing of one's parents, or in being ungrateful to them for helping you grow up? Isn't one tree the cause of the other's existence, and the latter the cause of the destruction of the former, in the same way as when a child murders his parent? You may say, in the case of the tree, no choice or will is involved, but that won't help you. In the case of human parricide, the act of will of the murderous child is only the cause of the action. It makes no difference to what relations the murderous act involves, these being exactly the same relations as are involved in the tree-killing episode that arises from some other principle. It is a will or a choice that determines a man to kill his parent, and the laws of matter and motion determine a sapling to destroy the oak from which it sprang. The relations have different causes in the two cases, but it's still the same set of relations in both. The discovery of those relations doesn't bring immorality into the picture in both. So that notion doesn't arise from such a discovery, which means that immorality is not discovered by reason. Essentially, of course, all he's arguing here is that we have, if you have an older tree that drops a seed and then a younger tree sprouts up from that seed beneath it, and that younger tree grows to be so big as to eclipse the older one, and the older one dies because the younger one lived. It's the same thing as if a child grows up and then kills their parent. But we would say that one of those situations is morally bad and the other one is not morally bad. We usually don't judge trees for doing that. We do judge humans for doing that. Why is that the case? Sort of his question. My second example is even more like its human analog. Why is it that in the human species, incest is criminal, when in non-human animals, the very same action and the very same relations haven't the faintest touch of moral baseness and ugliness? The rest of this paragraph is unduly hard to follow. Its main point is that the rationalist, the person who says that morality is discovered by reason, won't be helped by pointing out that humans have reason while other animals don't, or anyway, don't have enough reason to discover how disgustingly wrong incest is. That response doesn't spare the rationalist from the conclusion that incest in non-human animals is disgustingly wicked, though they aren't equipped to discover this. To avoid that conclusion on the grounds that such animals don't have reason, the rationalist would have to say, not that reason discovers moral truths, but that it creates them. This argument deserves to be weighted because it is, in my opinion, entirely decisive. Oh, really? What kind of, what did you write these essays for? Did you, were they prompted by anything? My argument doesn't merely prove that morality doesn't consist in any relations that are the objects of science. It also proves, just as conclusively, that morality doesn't consist in any matter of fact that can be discovered by the understanding. This is the second part of my argument, and if it can be made evident, we can conclude that morality is not an object of reason. Can there really be any difficulty in proving that vice and virtue are not matters of fact, whose existence we can infer by reason? Take any action that is agreed to be vicious, willful murder, for instance. Examine it in all lights, and you see if you can find the matter of fact or real existence that you call vice. However you look at it, all you'll find are certain passions, motives, volitions, and thoughts. Those are the only matters of fact in the case. The vice entirely escapes you as long as you focus on the object, that is, the individual action, the murder. You can never find it until you turn your reflection into your own breast and find a sentiment of disapproval that arises in you towards this action. Here is a matter of fact, but it is the object of feeling, not of reason. It lies in yourself, not in the object. So when you say of some action or character that it is vicious, all you mean is that you have a feeling or a sentiment of blame from contemplating it. So vice and virtue may be compared to sounds, colors, heat, and cold, which modern philosophy says are not qualities in objects, but perceptions in the mind. And this discovery in morals, like in other physics, is said to be regarded as considerable advance in the speculative sciences, though it is also like the other in having little or no influence on practice. Nothing can be more real or concern us more than our own sentiments of pleasure and uneasiness, and if these are favorable to virtue and unfavorable to vice, this is all that is needed for the regulation of our conduct and behavior. I also loved writing. You know, I used to write. I don't know if I'd call them essays. I guess they'd be essays because they're not anything else, but maybe I'd call them philosophy. Yeah, I used to try to write philosophy or essays, I guess. I don't know. Journal. Maybe I'd call them journaling. It's a little more formal than journaling. I enjoyed it. I can't forbear adding an observation that may be found of some importance. In every system of morality I have met, In every system of morality I have met with, I have noticed that the author proceeds for some time reasoning in the ordinary way to establish the existence of a god, or making points about human affairs, and then he suddenly surprises me by moving from propositions with the usual copula, is or is not, to ones that are connected by ought or ought not. This seems like a very small change, but it's highly important. For as this ought or ought not expresses some new relation or affirmation, it needs to be pointed out and explained, and a reason should be given for how this new relation can be, inconceivably, a deduction from others that are entirely different from it. Authors don't ordinarily take the trouble to do this, so I recommend it to you, and I'm convinced that paying attention to this one small matter will subvert all the vulgar systems of morality and let us see that the distinction between vice and virtue is not based merely on the relations of objects and is not perceived by reason. Moral distinctions are derived from a moral sense. Oh, nice. That's smart. That's smart. Yeah, using that work later. So the course of the argument leads us to conclude that since vice and virtue aren't discoverable merely by reason, that is, by comparing ideas, what enables us to tell the difference between them must be some impression or sentiment that they give rise to. Our decisions regarding moral rightness and wrongness are evidently perceptions. All perceptions are either impressions or ideas, so ruling out ideas leaves us with impressions. It is therefore more correct to speak of moral feelings than of moral judgments, though this feeling or sentiment is commonly so soft and gentle that we are apt to confuse it with an idea, according to our common custom of taking closely resembling things to be the same. The next question is, what kind of impressions are these, and how do they operate on us? We needn't spend long on this question. Clearly, the impression arising from virtue is agreeable, and the impression coming from vice is unpleasant. Every moment's experience must convince us of this. No spectacle is as fair and beautiful as a noble and generous action, none more disgusting to us than one that is cruel and treacherous. No enjoyment equals the satisfaction we get from the company of those we love and esteem, and the greatest of all punishments is to be obliged to live with those we hate or have contempt for. Even plays and romantic fiction can provide us with examples of the pleasure that virtue conveys to us and the pain that arises from vice. Now, since impressions, by which we distinguish moral good from moral evil, are nothing but particular pleasures or pains, it follows that when we want to understand why a certain personal character is praiseworthy or blameworthy, all we have to do is to discover what the principles are in us that make us feel a satisfaction or uneasiness from the survey of that character. Why is this action or sentiment or character virtuous or vicious? Because seeing it, or even just thinking about it, causes in us a pleasure or uneasiness of a particular kind. So when we've explained the pleasure or uneasiness, we have also sufficiently explained the virtue or vice. Having a sense of virtue is nothing but feeling a particular kind of satisfaction as a result of contemplating a character. Our praise or admiration is that feeling. What happens here is not this. We find this character pleases us, and from that, we infer that it is virtuous. What happens is this. We feel that this character pleases us in a certain way, and in having that feeling, we are in effect feeling that the character is virtuous. It's the same with our judgments concerning all kinds of beauty and taste and sensations. Our approval is contained in the immediate pleasure they convey to us. Against the theory that there are eternal rational measures of right and wrong, I have objected. There aren't any relations in the actions of thinking creatures that aren't also to be found in external objects, so that if morality always came with these relations, it would be possible for inanimate matter to become virtuous or vicious. Something like this may be objected against my theory. If virtue and vice are determined by pleasure and pain, they must in every case arise from pleasure and pain, so that any object, animate or inanimate, thinking or non-thinking, might become morally good or evil by arousing satisfaction or uneasiness. But although this objection seems to be the very same as mine, it has nothing like the force that mine has. There are two reasons why. It's obvious that the term pleasure covers sensations that are very different from one another, having only the distant resemblance that is needed for them to fall under a single abstract term. A good musical composition and a bottle of good wine equally produce pleasure, and their goodness is determined merely by the pleasure. But is that going to lead us to say that the wine is harmonious, or that the music has a good flavor? Well, in the same way we may get satisfaction from an inanimate object X, and from the character or sentiments of a person Y, but the satisfactions are different, which keeps our sentiments concerning X and Y from getting confused with one another, and makes us ascribe virtue to Y and not to X. Also, it is not the case that every sentiment of pleasure or pain arising from personal characters and actions is of the special kind that makes us praise or condemn. The good qualities of an enemy are hurtful to us, but they may still command our esteem and respect. It is only when a character is considered in general, without reference to our particular interests, that it causes the kind of feeling or sentiment that qualifies it as morally good or evil. It's true that sentiments from self-interest are apt to be confused with moral sentiments. We usually think that our enemy is vicious, not distinguishing his opposition to our interests from real villainy or baseness. But this doesn't stop it from being the case that those sentiments are, in themselves, distinct, and a man with good temperament and good judgment can preserve himself from these illusions. Similarly, although a musical voice is nothing but one that naturally gives a particular kind of pleasure, it is hard for a man to be aware that an enemy has an agreeable singing voice, or to admit that it is musical. But someone who has a fine ear and a good command of himself can separate these feelings, the hostility and the music-based pleasure, and give praise to what deserves it. You'll notice an even greater difference among our pains and pleasures if you think back to something in my account of the passions. Here, Hume is referring to his account of pride and humility, love and hatred. His explanation of his point is stunningly obscure, and we don't need it for what follows. I love this author's notes. That's great. His explanation of his point is obscure, and we don't need it for what follows. That's great. Can you imagine if your book was one day edited for that, and they left these little editor's notes? Your point got lost in the weeds here. It's obscure, unnecessary, and we're just going to skip it. You may now want to ask in a general way, what principle in the human mind creates this pain or pleasure that distinguishes moral good from moral evil? The first thing I have to say in reply to this is that it would be absurd to imagine that in every particular case, these sentiments are produced by a basic feature of our innate constitution. There is no end to the list of our duties, so it's impossible that we should have a basic instinct corresponding to each of them. If we did, that would mean that from our earliest infancy, our minds were imprinted with all the multitude of precepts that are contained in the completest system of ethics. If nature had gone about things in that way, that would have been quite out of line with its usual procedure, in which a few principles produce all the variety we observe in the universe, and everything is carried on the easiest and simplest manner. So we need a shorter list of primary impulses, in essence, some more general principles on which all our notions of morals are founded. In the second place, if we take the question to include this, ought we to search for these principles in nature, or rather elsewhere? I say that how we answer this question depends on the definition of the word nature, as ambiguous a word as there is. If nature is opposed to miracles, the distinction between vice and virtue is natural, but so also is every event that has ever happened in the world apart from miracles on which our religion is founded. So we aren't announcing much of a result when we say that the sentiments of vice and virtue are natural in this sense. But nature may instead be opposed to rare and unusual. And in this sense of the word, the common one, there can often be disputes about what is or isn't natural, and it's safe to say that we have no precise standard by which these disputes can be decided. Frequent and rare depend on how many examples we've observed, and that number may gradually increase or lessen, so we can't possibly fix any exact boundary between them. All I can say about this is that if it is ever right to call something natural in this sense, the sentiments of morality are certainly natural, because no nation or individual person has ever been utterly deprived of such sentiments, showing not the least approval or dislike of ways of behaving. These sentiments are so deeply rooted in our human constitution that the only way they could be erased and destroyed is by the relevant minds being thrown into confusion by disease or madness. But nature can also be opposed to artifice, as well as to what is rare and unusual. And in this sense, it is open to question whether the notions of virtue are natural or not. We readily forget that men's designs and projects and opinions are principles that are as necessary in their operation as are heat and cold, moist and dry. We instead take them to be free and entirely our own, contrasting them with the other principles of nature. Is the sense of virtue natural or artificial? I don't think that at this stage I can give any precise answer to this question. It may appear later on that our sense of some virtues is artificial while our sense of others is natural. The topic will be better discussed when we come to some details of each particular vice and virtue. Given these three definitions of natural and unnatural, we can now see how utterly unphilosophical it is to say that virtue is the same as what is natural and vice the same as what is unnatural. He's responding right here very specifically to a couple of different arguments. It starts with Aquinas and it sort of continues through Clark and Kant, sort of natural law arguments that we do good things because it's in accord with the natural law, it's in accord with goodness, right? Good things are in accord with good, and when we do bad things, when we do vice, that it is a digression from that. We are disobeying the natural law. We are going out of order. And so he's basically just saying, no, vice is natural as well. If virtue is natural, vice has to be natural. So we can't think of these actions as like in deliberate disobedience of the natural order of the entire world or something. Oh, that's awesome. You talking about the band? Or are you talking about I know you were talking about like Buddhist style singing earlier, so I'm curious if that's I feel like for some reason the music just like jumped up in volume. Maybe that's only on my end. In the first sense of the word nature, in which it is contrasted with miraculous, vice and virtue are equally natural. And in the second sense of nature, in which it is contrasted with unusual, it may be found that virtue is the unnatural one of the two. You must at least agree that that heroic virtue is as unnatural in this sense as the most brutal barbarity. As for the third sense of the word nature, it is certain that vice and virtue are equally artificial and out of nature. Whatever disputes there may be about whether the notion of merit or demerit in certain actions is natural or artificial, there is no disputing that the actions themselves are artificial and are performed with a certain design and intention. If that weren't so, they wouldn't count as either virtuous or vicious. So there's no way in which the contrast between natural and unnatural, in whatever sense you take it, can ever mark the line between vice and virtue. So we are still brought back to my first position, namely that virtue is distinguished by the pleasure and vice by the pain that we get from encountering or thinking about an action, sentiment, or character. This thesis is very useful because it lets us tackle the question, what is the origin of an action's moral rectitude or depravity? Without searching for any incomprehensible relations and qualities, without looking around for something that never did exist in nature or even in the clear and distinct parts of our imagination, it spares us all that, because it answers that question in the same way that it answers this. Why is it that thinking about certain general kinds of action or sentiment causes in us a certain satisfaction or uneasiness? I flatter myself that I have carried out a great part of my present plan by just getting the question into that form, which appears to me so free from ambiguity and obscurity. And he goes on about justice. Is justice, we're skipping justice. Is justice natural or artificial? It's a good question. It's interesting, but it's not what we're here for. The transference of property by consent. The obligation of promises. I always love it when these philosophers get really, really specific in their subsections. Like the transfer of property by consent. What? Further thoughts about justice and injustice. Origin of government. Just the source of allegiance. That sounds like a fantasy novel or something. Or like it sounds like Divergent, the next Divergent book. The source of allegiance. The measures of allegiance. The objects of allegiance. They always sound like they're writing about things that are way more interesting than they actually are writing about. The laws of nations. Chastity and modesty. The other virtues and vices. They all get lumped together because they're all clearly less important than chastity and modesty. Greatness of mind. They're so high and mighty. You can tell that this guy was British. I mean that in no offense to any British members of my audience. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Okay. I think where were we? We had virtue and vice in general. Maybe we covered that. Excellent. Okay. Well, we did it. We made it through Hume, book 3, chapter part 1 here, which was 18 pages. That's what we needed. Okay, well, I don't know. We might do more of this. I've got a bunch of philosophy to read this semester, so I'll probably, why not? I'll just stream it for you, and then you can, you know, maybe you wanna hear philosophy alongside me, or make me sing it again. That was an experience, singing Hume. I'll learn more genres of singing. Maybe I'll try to I wonder if you can be rapped. I'm just kidding. That button says sing. It says singing mode. It does not say rapping mode. We are not putting me through that. There is no rapping mode button. There will not be a rapping mode button. No. Okay. Oh, interesting. How's it going, Danger? Yeah, the interesting thing about Hume is that he incorporates, he's basically a sentimentalist virtue theorist, it seems like. I don't know if he's talking about virtues in a very, I don't know how loosely he's talking about virtues, because he talks about virtues all through the treatise on human nature. And then also in his Enquiry on Human Morals. And he talks about them much in the same way that Aristotle talks about virtues, that they're good character traits of morally upstanding, valuable people, but he doesn't talk about them metaphysically as so Aristotle, when he talks about virtues, his whole thing is that he thinks that virtues are excellences of human function. When humans do that thing best that only humans can do, much in the way that, like a guitar player plays notes beautifully and they play a good song, there are virtues to guitar playing, your ability to play it quickly, or your ability to play the right notes at the right time. Timing is a virtue. If you sing with it, there's virtues to singing, your ability to pitch and volume. All of those are all virtues that you can master to become an excellent singer. And virtues are just that. They're just meant to be things that you master for excellence, because virtues are just excellences of behavior. So in his sense, he thinks that these are the virtues humans serve a function. All things serve a function. Guitars serve a function to be played for music. Flowers serve a function. They serve a function in nature for pollination and stuff, but they also serve a function for humans, for beauty. So there are, and he's pretty relative to humans, right? He's talking about humans. He thinks that the world pretty much, we can assess it as functional for humans. And he thinks that morality also has a function to it, that it will help us achieve eudaimonia. If we are more moral, we will embed these good character traits into our constitution, into our souls, or imprint it onto our minds, and we will sort of achieve a Zen-like happiness because... or all of humanity will achieve collective happiness, the more virtuous it is, because everybody... or the individual, you've achieved that state of constantly acting with perfect function and time with what the moment requires. If you're always making morally good decisions, you'll have nothing to regret. That's his idea. So there's no way you can be unhappy. David Hume seems to follow that logic, but where Aristotle breaks off and talks about eudaimonia, David Hume, that happiness that you can achieve, David Hume never mentions it. So David Hume isn't giving us any reason to be moral. He's just saying why we're moral. And his explanation for it is that it comes down to our emotions. He's specifically trying to dispel with the functionalism that Aristotle has, but if you remove that functionalism, there's no point to being moral. Aristotle was trying to give us a reason to be moral, that it will make us happy. And David Hume is saying, actually, it's sort of, our happiness is sort of coincidental. It's the fact that we like these things, it's all a coincidence. We could easily have different preferences. Animals clearly have a different preference on something like incest. We easily could have ended up with that preference. And if you don't believe that's the case, you are empirically wrong, because many rich royal families in the Middle Ages and whatnot, they participated in it. So they committed incest. So it's there were different moral judgments depending on usually what position you occupied in society, or at least the moral judgments, they were less, they viewed it as less bad than most other people did. But also, of course, there are plenty of societies in which, if you're like the brother died, the wife was supposed to remarry the brother, right? Like there's like tons and tons of scenarios where those kinds of things have been allowed in human society. Now, all Hume is saying is that our preferences, our moral preferences, are adjustable. And because they're adjustable, they can't really be leading toward any one point. He's not giving us any reasons to be moral unless if we don't already have a reason to be moral. David Hume is kind of assuming if you're human, you probably want to be moral already. So there's not really any reason for me to be trying to motivate you to do that. I'm just going to describe how morality works. And he seems to be doing so in a very Aristotelian fashion. So they complement each other, although David Hume just sort of removes all of the normative force of it, which is a little bit sad, in my view. Anyway, that's what we got today. Peace and love, family. We will... we will raid someone. Where's a human? Who do we got? We need a raid human. Who do we got? Let's see. We got to the no one. That's okay. We're gonna jump over to, I don't know. Maybe we don't. I don't know. What do I do in this situation? Okay, yeah, you know what? We'll just call it a day a little bit. Anyway, love and peace we will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we're doing a lo-fi stream for writing. And then Friday, I think we might be doing a game, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. And we will be... I'm hoping at some point also we're going to do another stream with the BFB, the Mr. Bjornsson, to... I don't know. I'm not gonna like pretend to make plans, but it'd be nice to play Crusader Kings again this weekend, maybe. I'll play Crusader Kings in preparation of destroying him the next time we face each other on the European continent. Oh yeah, no worries, no worries. Peace and love, family. See you on the flip side tomorrow. And yeah, have a happy remainder of your day or night, time zone.